a story to tell you, and this story is about Curious George. This is George. He was a good little monkey and always very curious. He wanted to find out what was going outside the zoo. And everybody, do you know who is George? George is a monkey. One day, when the keeper was not paying attention, George held on the key for the cage. When the keeper discovered what had happened, it was too late. George was gone. Where was George? They looked for him everywhere, but they could not find him. George was hiding on the head of his friend, the elephant. Finally, the keeper gave up looking for him. George had a nice cozy spot to sleep under the elephant's right ear. And next day when the zoo opened, he got away safely. Once in the street, George felt a little scared. What should he do in the big city? Maybe he could find his friend, the man with the yellow hat that brought him over from Africa a long time ago. Only George didn't know where he lived. Then a bus came that George didn't ridden on one. Quickly, he climbed a lamp post. Then he jumped on the bus quickly, and all the way they went. Now they're right in the center of the turn. There is so much to see that George didn't know where to look first. If only he could ride like this forever. But then George felt a little tired and a little dizzy. Quickly, when the bus began to quickly when the bus was stopping, George had got off the bus that stopped. Then he thought, what is that? And there was a restaurant behind him. And when he went inside, he said to himself, sniffing the air, something smells good, said George. Quickly, he went into the cookery. George saw a big black pot. Of course, he was curious. He had to find what was in it. Quickly, when the cook came back, he had a big surprise. Spaghetti was all everywhere, and a little monkey was in the middle of it. George had been eating yards and yards and yards and yards. The cook was a kind man. Actually, he did not scold too much. But George had it to clean up. My, thought the cook, what a lot of them they were. And the cook said to George, you are lucky to have 4 hands. He said, you can do things twice as quickly. But George noticed he had 2 hands, but his feet and his hands look a lot alike. I have a handy little fellow like you to wash windows, said the cooker. If you would like him, I would take him to you. They went in a train and they went up the stairs to the building. And the cook's friend was an elevator man. "Sure, I can use you," said the elevator man, proud to himself. But never, and the elevator man said, "I know you're excited, but don't get into trouble. Never mind the people, what they're doing inside." George promised to be good, but little monkeys sometimes forget. George was ready to start. My, how many windows were there? But George had to head quickly since he went with 4 hands. George climbed to window like he did in the Africa jungle, to tree to tree. In one window, a little baby boy was crying because he did not want to eat his spinach. In another room, a man was sleeping and snoring. Like, shh, shh. That's how man snores. George was sorry it was not his friend, the man with the yellow hat. He listened to the funny noise for a while, then went on working. But what was going on here? George stopped working and pressed his nose on the window. 2 painters were working and painting the whole room. George was fascinated. Of course he was curious. He needed to help he thought that the painters were making a jungle. In the next page, the 2 painters were getting ready to go out for lunch. As soon as they left, George climbed in. What great paint and brushes they had, thought George. They were ready, and then the 2 painters were ready to go in and paint. They opened the door and stood themselves with their mouth wide open. The whole room had changed into a jungle with palm trees all over it. A giraffe and a zebra and 2 leopards. And a little monkey was busy painting itself on one of the trees. Then the painters knew what had happened. Suddenly, George was close to a door. First the elevator man and the 2 painters and the woman that lived in the place. "Oh, my lovely room," cried the woman. "Don't let him get away. Please bring him to me right away," said the woman. George headed to the fire escape. He went in the fire escape. Here was his chance. They could not jump, but George could easily jump. The moment he would be safe, poor little George. He forgot that the floor was hard as stone, not like the soft grass of the jungle. Too bad. "He got what he deserved," said the woman, "making my apartment into a jungle. Indeed. I told him he would get into trouble," the elevator man added. He was too curious. George had to lie in bed with his feet high up in the air. And it all started to pump so nicely. If only George hadn't been so curious, he could have a lot of fun. Now it was too late. But next day, when George's friend came with the big yellow hat. The man with the yellow hat got very excited. "This is George!" the man with the yellow hat screamed when he saw the fun picture on the page. And then he rushed to a telephone booth to call the hospital. He pressed any number that the nurse's phone number had. "I am George's friend," said the man with the yellow hat that the nurse was holding the telephone in her hand. "Please take good care of him so he can get better quickly. I want to take him to a movie studio. Don't let him get any more mischief until I can take him away." Finally, the day came when George could walk again. "Your friend is going to pick you up away this morning. Please stay here and don't touch anything." George promised to be good, but little monkey is easy to forget. George looked at all the strange hospital things, and he noticed that as soon as he was alone, he was fascinated. "I wonder what is in the big blue bottle," George thought. George was curious. He smelled funny when he put all the cream on his hand and arm and head in of the bottle. And then stars had begun to tweeze off his head, and he felt like if he was flying. Then everything went dark. And this is how the man with the yellow hat found George. They picked him up and shook him, but they could not wake him up. He was so fast asleep that they had to put him under the shower. How surprised he was when he woke up. George said goodbye to the nurse and the kind doctor. And then all the way they zoomed over to the movie studio. In the president's office, George had to sign a contract. Now he was a movie actor. In the movie studio, George liked the jungle they made for him and played happily ever. And then when the picture was ready, George invited all of his friends, the nurse, the doctor, and the two painters, and the woman that lived in the place, and the elevator man, and all the other people that came. Now the lights went out and the movie began to start. "This is George," the movie feeder said. "He lived in Africa. He was a good little monkey and always very curious." The end.